climate change and energy independence, my flagship issue. I established a special select committee to deal with that issue, to make the change that is necessary, which I think being energy independent is a national security issue, is a health, reducing our dependence on foreign oil. It's a health issue by reducing the pollutants in the air. It's an economic issue by creating good, clean, green jobs and keeping us #1 in technology. And it is a moral issue to preserve God's beautiful planet for future generations. Having that in mind, we, in preparation for the Copenhagen conference, which comes up at the end of, which comes up in December, the end of this year, our select committee visited our countries in the EU. The EU has been very much in the lead on this issue. We went to India. The committee went to Brazil. Now we were going to. We had some conversations with the Chinese government in Washington when they visited and extended an invitation to come to China to talk about this issue. So we accepted their invitation, which was extended earlier this year, to visit in May during our Memorial Day district work period. It was, they invited me, Nancy Pelosi, so they knew that I would, of course, bring up the subject of human rights in China, and also at a time when the North Korea issue was escalating, or again escalating. So that was going to be a subject of our conversation among other issues, but they would be the three primary. But the central focus and the purpose of their invitation and our visit was to focus on climate change. On the way there, we stopped in Alaska, which was really a revelation to many of us. We saw what was happening with our own eyes in Greenland, the melting of the polar cap. The idea that it was happening in our own country, in Alaska, should have been clear to us, but until we saw it for ourselves, it wasn't. What was interesting, though, was the impact that it will have, what's happening there on the rest of the planet. As the polar cap melts, the white, which reflects the sun and heat, becomes dark blue sea, which absorbs the heat and affects the thermal management of the planet. The impact that this has on China is that the glaciers are melting in the Himalayas, affecting the great rivers of China all the way down to the Mekong, Southeast Asia and Mekong Delta. The Gobi Desert is encroaching on the areas around it with sandstorms in Beijing. The rising sea level could have a terrible impact on many of the coastal areas of China, Shanghai and Hong Kong, of course, included. So then that fact that right now, in the current situation, 600,000 people in China die each year of air pollution. So this is an issue of concern to everyone on the planet, and I address some of the specific challenges for China. The message that I took there was about environmental justice in every country, and not just China, in the United States, in the EU, and the developing world. If we are fighting climate change and want to change our energy policies, we have to do so in a way that is fair to people, in fact, fair to poor people who might be negatively impacted. We saw in Alaska tribes of villages having to relocate, the adaptation to get away from the encroachment of the sea, the villages melting into the sea. We see in the United States where environmental decisions can have a very negative impact on communities. But everybody is concerned, wherever they live in the world, is the air they breathe and the water they drink. And all of that is affected by the climate change and energy issue. So we got there and we saw just remarkable work that the Chinese government was doing in order to reduce emissions, closing down dirty coal plants, building some new ones, better technology, but nonetheless still coal plants. China is doing a great deal to reduce its emissions, but its development is so great that they still are a net emitter at the end of the day, and that's something that we needed to talk to them about. It was important for us because in the United States and in the United States Congress, people would say, well, why should we do anything? China's not doing anything. And the Chinese probably say, why should we do anything? The U.S. isn't doing anything. So the night before we left, it was my good fortune that the House Energy and Commerce Committee passed very strong legislation to reduce emissions in the United States with a cap-and-trade system. Everybody was surprised that we were able to accomplish it. When we went to China, we could bring that with us. And it was really a game changer for us. It made it a completely different story. We are doing something. Let's see how we can work together. Recognizing what they have done is remarkable in terms of high-speed rail, new construction, and having that be less energy intense in their manufacturing and their construction. They're doing remarkable things. But again, with the rate of development, it's still a net emitter. So we talked about how we could work together. Chinese government, of course, they say, well, you developed freely, without any constraints. We should too. Well, we wish we hadn't made the mistakes we made. The fact is, the whole planet is affected by all of it. The U.S. and China are the two biggest emitters. They say, well, we are not, you're the biggest emitters, we're the lowest emitters per capita, which is probably true, but still not the point in terms of the impact it has on the planet and on China's environment. Third point they make is the developed world should pitch in 1% of its GDP to pay for what you want us to do in the developing world. And we say to them, you're at least a hybrid. You've lifted 400 million people out of poverty, bravo, but that makes you something more than Mali, or just a, strictly speaking, developing country. And the last thing they say is that since we buy most of China's products, so many of China's products, we should pay for the emissions that those products, manufacturing those products, make in China, which is, of course, interesting, but not the way it works. So in any event, that's a good starting, that's a good place to stake out. But now we have to get serious about how we go forward. I was hopeful. Some of my members, some who were a Republican member on the trip, was very, shall we say, he was concerned about intellectual property. All of this is about how we can develop the technologies to take us into the future, to lower emissions and be more energy efficient. He says that, this can't work if China and India and other countries are not respecting the intellectual property that goes with this, because that's just not fair. So he was less hopeful. One of my colleagues, Ed Markey, who's the chair of the committee, he was very enthusiastic. I was hopeful that we can work together. I, in turn, now have invited the president of the National People's Congress to come to the United States when they decide that they want us to make the announcement as to when we will do that, but it will be soon so that we can be talking about how we can work together for Copenhagen. That isn't the only issue, though.